Please join me as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. My name is Bill Raditz. I'm a sergeant with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to welcome you to the 16th Annual Silent Angel Memorial. We're happy to see everyone this evening. Since 2002, we have gathered together each year to remember your loved ones whose lives were taken by the hand of another. We are honored that you allow us this time to reflect with you and reflect in your own way and know one night that all will be remembered. The angel ornaments placed on the tree symbolize life renewed and hopes in the face of loss. Tonight's blessing will be given by Pastor Larry Crabtree of the SAYSF Bible Church.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Today in churches actually all over the world began the first Sunday of Advent. And I think most have focused today on hope. And it's times like this, I think that's an important thing to remember, is hope. Now it's Christmas time, and we've got our Christmas tree and our angels that we'll be using this evening. So I think I'll take some liberty and share with you my source of hope. Just real quick, I want to encourage you a little bit as we pray. And I find my encouragement in what Jesus said so long ago in John 16 and verse 33. He said, I've said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world, you will have tribulation. But take heart, I've overcome the world. Christmas time, when we lose loved ones, I think anew reminds us of the anguish and the pain in our hearts. One of the things I've appreciated about the Bible, it doesn't mince words. Jesus said, in this world, tribulation, it means you're going to have anguish. You're going to have pain. It's going to be difficult. But he said, I came that you might have peace. And peace, that word speaks of tranquility, harmony, rest. And I look at our world around us, and as a chaplain, the sheriff's office, things aren't right. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of grief. I watch the news, I see division. But I find my hope in the one that we celebrate this time of year. So in your pain and in your grief, the loss of loved ones, as we gather today, we live in a great county. I got to tell you, I love St. Mary's County. I have come to so love the people here, our deputies, the legal department. I get to know judges. I get to meet with attorneys. And though this world is filled with a lot of unrighteousness, there's some pretty righteous people that God's given to us here. And I think this is a great county to live in. And tonight is a good example of that. And that brings us peace. And someday I believe that Jesus is going to return, and he's going to make good in his promise that he's going to take all the unrighteousness and he's going to make it right. He's the Prince of Peace. So join me in prayer. Father, tonight we gather. It is a time that is to be joyful. But Father, you also know that in this time it's one of the most difficult times for so many. It's a period of time when we're to rejoice and we're to be focused on good things that also reminds us keenly of those we love that have been lost. And when it comes to what we remember, these that have been lost due to unrighteous acts, due to evil. We don't understand that. We can't reconcile that. It hurts. But in the midst of our hurt, you said that we can take heart. We can be confident. That's a place that we can run to, that we can go to you, and you give us a promise. We haven't seen it fulfilled just yet, but my hope, my belief is you will. And you'll bring justice, that though we have good judges and good attorneys and people that are doing everything they can, we know we're limited, but God, you're not. So allow yourself to be known in our community as we've gathered here, loving each other, sharing with each other our griefs. As together we know that we can find hope as we come together in all these good things that you've given, and that for a little while you could still the pain and bring that joy into what this season represents. Thank you that tonight exists. I pray this in the name of Jesus, my Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. I'd like to invite Sheriff Timothy Cameron to come forward and offer some welcoming remarks.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Certainly my pleasure to welcome you to the 16th Annual Silent Angel Memorial. I truly hope in some way that this assuages the terrible sense of loss that you've experienced, losing a loved one at the hand of another. Especially during this holiday season, I hope that this fosters not how you lost that loved one, but how they lived. It is a bittersweet memorial that I look forward to each year, so I hope that everyone here has a wonderful holiday and that 2018 is kind to us all. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Our guest speaker this evening is, I have to move this down because he's a lot taller. Our guest speaker this evening is Leon Russell. Mr. Russell attended and spoke at the memorial 2 years ago. His daughter was taken from us in 1989 in Calvert County, and he's here tonight to speak again about the ongoing grief and experiences he's had. Please welcome Mr. Leon Russell.
Thank you. Thank you. Give you a little background. The individual who murdered my daughter pled guilty to murder and attempted murder and received a life sentence plus 15 years. 2 years ago, I received a letter from the Maryland Parole Commission stating that this individual will be coming up for a parole hearing. Because of the nature of the homicide, I felt that I wanted to do all in my power to oppose the parole of this individual. There's no playbook around that I'm aware of that tells you how to prepare for a parole hearing and go through it itself. So I'm going to share with you what I did. It's not necessarily the best way, but it's what I did. Initially, I know I felt like I didn't know where to turn. It was just overpowering as to what I expected to have to do. But as I thought about things, I realized I had really 6 opportunities to try and influence anyways the parole commissioners who hold the parole hearing. The first was through a written victim impact statement that I filed with the state's attorney's office as well as the parole commission. And of course I had my family members, wife, son, and daughter also file their statements. Secondly, because I was going to participate in the parole hearing, I would have a chance to provide 8 minutes of comments to the parole commission. Thirdly, I met with the state's attorney's office in Prince Frederick to make sure that we were on the same wavelength in respect to opposing the parole of this individual. Fourth, I had an opportunity to meet with one of the parole commissioners in Baltimore, which is one of the things your rights you're given before the hearing. And I have an opportunity anyways to provide my views at that time. Fifth, I was aware of the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, which is the organization that Stephanie Roper's parents formed back in 1983, I guess it was, when she was murdered very, very horribly down here in St. Mary's County. The Ropers found that they had no rights at that time, and so they have done a lot for all of us, getting rights for us as victims. And lastly, because I worked with Tony O'Donnell, who at the time was my Maryland state delegate, I asked him to provide a letter to the parole commission opposing the parole of the individual. Now, the sources of information that I reviewed in preparing for my victim impact statements and the parole hearing itself were the Maryland State Police reports, since they investigated the homicide, they're the ones that filed, of course, the record associated with that investigation. I understand that it could be either the sheriff's department who investigates a murder or the state police, and so either one would be the appropriate body to go to review their records. Secondly, I contacted the state's attorney's office over in Prince Frederick, and they were extremely helpful. They said, come in and look at all the records we have, and there are probably 4 inches of records that they have. Thirdly, I reviewed the website of the Maryland Parole Commission, which has a lot of information about the process and other rights that you will hold. But also, they're the website that can tell you where that prisoner is located. And that's important because that's probably where the parole hearing is going to be held. There were 4 important things that I gleaned from my review of records and talking to people. First one was that the individual, I'll call him the offender, had no alcohol in his system when he did this. Second, he had no drugs in his system when he did this. Third, when he was given a psychiatric examination in Crownsville shortly after the murder, the psychologist, or rather psychiatrist there, felt that he was giving them erroneous answers, trying to convince them that he was insane. And lastly, when I talked to a representative from the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, she told me that she had attended 30 parole hearings, and she couldn't remember any one of those where the parole commissioners had granted parole. So I think that says that the presence of you and I at these hearings is extremely important. The state police records, if that's who investigated the homicide, are located up in Baltimore. And you can go to their website, but you'll have to write a letter to them. They return the letter telling you how much it will cost and the size of the investigation. If it's the sheriff's office, then they're located, of course, locally here, and they have someone similar who handles the records there that you would have to contact. The state's attorney's office here in Leonardtown now has a victims witness coordinator who I think you should contact, and she will link you up with an appropriate assistant state's attorney who is handling this case and potential parole hearing. Asked to see all the relevant records, including the psychiatric report if they have it. The Maryland Parole Commission headquarters is located in Baltimore. It's in northwest Baltimore on Ricertown Road. And you are afforded the opportunity to meet a parole commissioner for the hearing. You'll be told about the process and to answer any questions you may have. This I took advantage of, and also I had requested when I talked to the representative from the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center that she attend with me, because she said she has done that for many people. The meeting lasted maybe an hour, and I gleaned one important thing, I thought. I asked the parole commissioner what records they reviewed for a hearing, and she said, what's ever in the file, which I thought I was aghast at the answer, because I thought they would have a list of, this is the minimum records that you ought to review before you conduct parole hearing. And I also asked her, well then, do you recall seeing a psychiatric report in that file? She didn't. So when I returned to home here in Leonardtown, I stopped by the Prince Frederick State's Attorney's Office and asked them to send to the Parole Commission a copy of that psychiatric report, because I thought it was extremely insightful into the mind of this individual, at least back in 1990. Now, the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center is located up in Upper Marlboro, and they provide all sorts of information for victims. That's their purpose. They attend trials. They may even help to write a victim impact statement. And of course, the most important thing to me was that they would join me in my meeting with the individual parole commissioner in Baltimore, as well as go to the prison with me and my family to sit in on the parole hearing. They also, of course, lobby the legislature to get additional benefits for us as victims. And lastly, I talked to Tony O'Donnell, as I mentioned as my delegate. I happened to work with him for many years. And I asked him, of course, to write a letter to the Parole Commission chairman, recommending denial of the parole hearing, or parole rather. In addition, he did something else for me, which I'll get to here in a minute. So I think, don't overlook politicians. After all, the parole commission, the commissioners of the parole commission are picked by the governor, they're approved by the Senate, so many of them are politicians. They also have a minister, they have social service type people, but varied backgrounds. Now the parole hearing is held if the offender, if a homicide occurred before October of 1994, is held approximately when the offender has served 1/4 of his sentence. If the homicide occurred after 1994, October 1994, then he has to serve half his sentence before he is eligible for a parole hearing. I can't quite figure out how they do the math, because typically life sentence is viewed as 50 years. And my offender had life plus 15. So 50% of 65 years is not 27 years. But who's for me to complain? Now the parole commission only will notify you about this parole hearing if you have filled out the crime victims notification request form. And that probably nowadays is done pretty much automatically after a homicide occurs, and the state's attorney's office will send it to you or give it to you. But if you aren't sure, contact the state's attorney's office to make sure they have one if you want to participate in parole hearing or even be aware of the parole hearing. And keep it up to date. If your address changes, make sure you go back to that form and change it. About, when I received the letter from the parole commission, they included another form called the open hearing request form. And it's a little confusing as to what it really amounts to, but what it says is you as a victim or the representative of a homicide victim have a right to have this hearing open. That means open to the public. But if you want to participate, you have to declare you want an open hearing. And be aware of the fact that if you do have an open hearing, that the family of the prisoner can also attend. And as I mentioned, I think earlier, the parole hearing is held at the prison where the prisoner is located. In my case, attended, of course, to be far as you could go away. About 3 weeks prior to the scheduled date of the parole hearing, we got notified of the time and date. And about a week later, we were sent, and most of this is done over the email websites. We were sent the instructions for what you must do upon entering the prison. It goes through security just like you would in there. The metal detector, handheld items go through a conveyor and X-ray machine. But they do have a locker outside the security area where you can stow a lot of stuff that you don't want to take in with you. Normally, the parole hearing is held in a small room, at least at this prison. I would guess 20 by 20. And astoundingly, they have the prisoner in there with you. I can't imagine anything more frustrating than being forced to look at this prisoner who murdered my daughter. But they would have the two commissioners who will be hearing this hearing, conducting the hearing rather. They're back to the wall. Then the prisoner faces them in this chair. He has, I believe, two guards on either side, one guard on either side of him. And he is told he is not to turn around and look at the victims. Because the girlfriend of my daughter is so traumatized by this event, he was going to kill her. That's his main reason for going to her house. She still has PTS from this at that time, 27 years. And even though I tried through a letter to the chairman of the parole commission, and she had a delegate from Calvert County also write to the chairman, asking if we could make some sort of arrangement so we wouldn't have to do this prisoner. And of course, we heard nothing from the chairman. So I contacted Tony O'Donnell, and he made a phone call to the chairman. He happened to know him. Political parties the same, which maybe helped, I don't know. But and he got the chairman to agree to arrange for speakers and microphones so that we could sit outside the room and not view this prisoner. The prisoner did have two members of his family, his mother and sister, in this hearing. The hearing process starts out with you giving your oral presentation. You can make pretty much probably put in there whatever you want. When I did this, I was allowed 8 minutes. Now, according to the website, it's 5 minutes. Not a whole lot of time, so you have to be very concise. However, the lead commissioner for our hearing was very nice and said, take the time you need. We're here to listen to you. The parole commissioners, after they listen to you, will then go and ask questions of the prisoner. And they have to sort of go through a laundry list of items that they sort of need to check off before they feel comfortable in releasing this prisoner on parole. I won't cover all of them, they're on the website. But, of course, it's what he's done to improve himself, which you may or may not believe. Whether it's compatible to release him into the community safety-wise. Of course, the impact it's had on you, the family, is one thing they have to consider. And lastly, they'll ask him about the crime and why he did this. And in my case, he gave a BS answer as to why he did this, which I think was another nail in his coffin, because he probably is a pathological liar. At any rate, after the interview of the prisoner by the parole commissioners, they will adjourn, deliberate for a little bit, and then come tell you what their decision has been. They have 3 choices: release them on parole rather, deny parole, or deny parole but schedule another hearing 3 years away. And that apparently is based on the age of the prisoner, what this interval is. I understand that in my case, the decision was no parole. I know it was no parole, but I think it's no more hearings after the period. At any rate, be aware that even though a prisoner is denied parole, maybe forever, he still can be released before the end of his sentence, because prisoners are given good conduct or credits for good behavior, working in the prison, taking educational courses, and I don't know what else. And they can significantly reduce the sentence that he serves. And lastly, just for information, the parole commission holds about 12,000 hearings a year, and they grant about 1/5 of the parole. 1/5 of the presidents receive parole. Because I've taken more time than I wanted, if there are any questions, I'll be here at the end of the ceremonies here. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russell, for that important information. We will now have the ornament presentation. As the name of your silent angel is read aloud, please come forward where Ms. Bildman will present you with the ornament to be placed on the tree. Also, a member of the Sheriff's Office Color Guard will escort you, symbolizing law enforcement has not forgotten and will continue to stand at your side.
Richard L. Guy.
Raymond Burrell.
Stephanie Ann Roper.
Thomas Tippett.
Vincent Cassiola.
Kevin Lamont Mills.
Chung Sisler.
John Baker.
Ralph Decarlo.
Douglas Kovac.
Lawrence Miles.
Kenneth Chase.
Sarah M. Sapp.
Charles Donaldson.
Timothy Ryan Harper.
Francis Woodburn.
David W. Schulz.
David M. Atlas, Jr.
John Hall.
Randy Brooks.
Tony Lanasi III.
Jerry Colbroth.
Marisha White.
Robert Pulanco.
Stephen Alowu.
Robin Morgan Keenan.
Claudia Pickeral.
Paul Harrington.
Ashley N. Jones.
Darlene Wathen.
Thomas Scriber.
Sarah Collins.
Joseph T. Maddox.
Darryl R. Nakel.
James Jones.
Michael Blankenship.
Ethel Gray.
Elizabeth Oliver.
John Butler.
Lewis and Edward Moreland.
Kevin M. Clark.
Matthew Jones.
Paula Hoops.
Patricia Dean.
Elmer Buckler.
Keith Bonds.
Ayanna L. Taylor.
Darlene M. Dowsey.
Suzanne and Timothy Combs.
Janet Ann Raganato.
Tavaris Sharon Hewlett.
James Augustus Chaporis.
Robert Phipps Sr.
Edmond Travis Copeland.
Mark Allen Peterson.
Kenneth J. Walter.
Thomas J. Saunders.
Billy G. Gurley.
William L. Smith, Jr.
Christopher M. Patty.
Drew McDonald Thompson, also known as Opie.
Not when I could help it. Thank you. Thank you.
Devon Baker.
Brooke Hart.
Antonio Pollard.
Gary Trogdon.
DeAndre Augustus Hawkins.
Robert Lee McDowney Sr.
Kimberly Dawn Carter.
Moneta Jo Strickland.
Walter Bryant Dorsey III.
Cody Michael Lacey.
Emmett Brentley Wilkins.
Cecilia Darlene Stubbs.
Thank you very much. It's important to recognize that this event would not be possible without the help and support of many people. To those who volunteered their time and to those who donated money, we thank you. We would like to offer a special thank you to Leon Russell, Pastor Larry Crabtree, Sheriff Timothy Cameron, Mrs. Jody Irwin, retired Lieutenant Jack Payne in the Criminal Justice Program, Special Agent Victoria Aliato, and a very special thanks to the Bay District Firehouse for the generous use of their facility year after year. And of course, none of this would be possible without the founding of the Silent Angel Memorial by Mrs. Eileen Bildman. Thank you very much. There's going to be some refreshments in the back. You're welcome to them. And please hang around and make sure that you sign your email so that we can make sure that we get in touch with you for next year's presentation.